tomatoes. You are no match for the summer heat.
Not so fast, Mr. Reaper Man. Today we are talking about how to keep your tomatoes alive during the summer heat.
You and what disposable income?
We're doing it on a budget, baby. Kind of.
Today's objective is to keep our tomatoes alive. Lately, it has been over 90 degrees. It is hot.
For your tomatoes to survive in this kind of heat, there's a lot of things that have to go right, and the biggest thing I'm not doing right now is giving my tomatoes enough shade. So today, I'm gonna try to fix that. And that's why I'm installing shade cloth. But your boy's on a budget. I ain't made of money. So, I'm not gonna pretend this is gonna be the cheapest build ever, but we're gonna use some T-posts, some rebar, and some PVC pipe to hopefully build something that's not gonna completely break the bank. It's gonna be a little bit cheaper than, building out a canopy that's gonna cost you thousands of dollars. But before I get into that, I just wanna tell you guys a few things that you're gonna wanna cross off the list just to make sure you're getting the basics down before you even put any shade cloth up.
First thing, you definitely gotta be watering consistently. I neglected my tomatoes a little bit, and that's why I started getting some blossom end rot. You can actually overwater and get blossom end rot as well, but pretty sure that wasn't the case. I think I was underwatering. Number 2, you wanna have some mulch. Now is actually a really good time to reapply some more mulch if you haven't done that for a couple months. Make sure your soil's covered. And number 3, you gotta make sure your plants have enough airflow. If that means you need to prune, then do what you gotta do.
Also, never a bad idea to go ahead and chop them yellow leaves off. We don't need them. If you do, make sure you try to keep it clean when you're moving in between plants. Bring some rubbing alcohol and a microfiber towel, and that would do the trick. Let's get into the fun part. We got a build. The build is pretty simple. Basically, you're just gonna have 4 T-posts on each corner. Inside the ridges of those T-posts, I'm putting a massive piece of rebar, and I'm gonna put one on every single corner. On the top of that rebar, you're gonna put a 3/4 inch PVC pipe, bend it over the top.
Come on, get in there.
And that's just gonna be the support for the shade cloth so that you can slide it right over. And pretty much you just pull it over the top and secure it with some zip ties. So honestly, pretty easy, a little sketchy on the ladder, but just gotta be careful. The biggest flaw was I definitely put this up way too high. It's about 12:30 p.m. Then it's the next day, and we're about to see if this thing is actually working. I would give it a hard not really. 2 hours later. Plants are getting blasted. They're basically getting full sun, so we're gonna have to fix that. Look at that stance. Thing of beauty. So yeah, that's what I did. I basically just tried to chop the whole thing straight down and hope it didn't topple over. And it did topple over, but we made it through. The plants didn't get crushed. Too bad. Crisis averted. I did have to retrellis them, but that's okay.
And I'm not gonna lie to you, it's looking pretty janky right now, but I think it's gonna keep my tomatoes alive.
In the aesthetic appeal department, definitely not doing a 10 out of 10, maybe a 3 out of 10.
But yeah, I think if I would've cut the rebar initially, I think this would've been super easy and it would've worked out really well. And I would just cut the rebar to like 1 or 2 feet, put it on the top of the T-post, seal it, then put the PVC pipe on it. Let's see. Those are my neighbors. The last build was the maximum effort, minimum efficiency build. This is gonna be the least effort, hopefully the maximum efficiency.
What made this so easy is all these peppers and tomatoes that are over here, they're already being trellised by a cattle panel that's on a T-post. If you wanted to make something super quickly, you already have some T-posts up, you can just put some rope or jute twine straight through the shade cloth, wrap it around the T-post for tension. That's basically it. It took me 5 minutes. As I was wrapping this up, I had some visitors.
You have a good run, Sadie.
It is the next day after we went ahead and fixed this, and we're gonna see how much shade we're getting.
I'll start with the new shade cloth I put up. On the left side over here, we're getting shade. On this side, obviously, we're not getting shade. And it looks like our peppers down here are getting a lot of great shade. This is what we came here for. It looks like we're getting a lot more shade than we were. It's not completely covered.
Even though 100% of the tomatoes aren't getting shade, most of the tomatoes getting shade, which is a big improvement from the skyscraper that I originally put up. Moving in the right direction. And just a little side note, you guys have probably noticed I got a lot of peppers around my tomatoes. Shade cloth can also help peppers a lot. Just a couple weeks ago, when it started getting really hot, I started getting sun scalding, and covering them with shade should help with that.
I just watered the plants for the first time after having the shade up. The difference with how much I needed to water was crazy. Usually, if I watered my plants this time of day, they would just dry out immediately. The plants would just drink up as much water as possible. I can already tell that I'm not gonna need to water as much, which is really nice. I mean, I knew that in theory, but to see it in practice already, 1 day after having the shade up, is actually pretty crazy. So the plan was I was going to basically use what I learned from the first build and the second build in order to improve it so that I could cover the rest of my garden, make it look pristine, make it look super nice and perfect, all that good stuff, because like I said, didn't do too great with the aesthetics of the first build. However, it started raining real bad and I just had to cover it before I left for vacation. It's coming down now, baby. Yep. I ended up just putting the shade cloth on top of the T-post, doing whatever I could to get it covered as quickly as possible because the rain was coming in. Before I go, I just want to tell you guys about a couple things that I learned throughout this process.
Here's a list of all the materials I use. How much you would pay depends on how many T-posts you need, how much rebar you want to use, how much PVC pipe you're going to use. And I also overbought a couple things. Like I bought more rebar than I needed because initially I didn't realize that it would make more sense to cut the rebar. I also overbought PVC pipes. I used PVC. In retrospect, I probably would have used PVC conduit because I did not realize at the time, but PVC is actually not UV resistant, so it's more likely to break down over time. Now, as far as things that you could skip out on if you really wanted to make this as affordable as possible, I mean, you could literally get away with just buying the shade cloth. If you're trellising your plants, chances are you're gonna have something you can attach your shade cloth to. So as an example, I already had T-posts that were around my peppers, so I just put the shade cloth on top of the T-post, stake it in the ground. At that point, you have shade for whatever plants you need. And what that would have cost is just the price of the shade cloth and the price of whatever you're using to secure it. Or you might already have some jute twine, you might have some paracord, some rope, something to keep the cloth down. I really like the 100-foot roll that I got because it gives me a little bit of flexibility. I also think you get a lot of bang for your buck if you buy a really big roll and just cut it off as you need it.
Another thing that you might want to consider is whether or not you want your shade cloth to be removable or not. In July and August, where I live, most of the time it's going to be 90 degrees and higher. So I'm not too worried about being able to take my shade cloth off. That said, depending on what climate and environment you live in, you might want to consider having something where you can remove it if there are certain days where it gets a little bit cooler. For example, if it's in the 70s and there's not that much sun out, you might want to consider taking your shade cloth down for the day. A lot of people will use clips and they'll use shade cloth that has little grommets in the corner. So basically you just put the grommets on and you can just take them off the clips whenever you want. Thank you for watching. This is actually my first YouTube video. The next one is probably going to be about building a compost bin. So stick around if that's something you want to check out. Feel free to like and subscribe. And anything that I talked about in this video, I'm going to put it in the link in the description. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to say. So adios.
If you'd like to see me make some more stuff that hopefully works a little bit, fingers crossed. I can't guarantee I'm the best craftsman, but hey, we're going to get better one day at a time.